This is CBC Vancouver News.
A disturbing notice from ER doctors at Surrey Memorial Hospital.
Yeah, it's stressful for doctors. It's also stressful for patients.
The warning that patients are suffering and getting substandard care. Plus, tens of thousands of British Columbians are on edge tonight, bracing to leave at a moment's notice. Fort St. John now under evacuation alert as the threat of a nearby wildfire grows. And WestJet pilots threaten to strike, saying they're ready to ground planes as early as Friday if negotiations fail. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. Dan is on assignment tonight. It's an explosive call to action from inside one of the province's busiest hospitals. A group of emergency physicians are sharing disturbing details about unsafe conditions at Surrey Memorial Hospital, describing what they call an unrelenting crisis. Tanya Fletcher has our top story.
Surrey Memorial Hospital is in crisis, say physicians who work there, and their collective letter does not hold back. Obtained by CBC News, the letter highlights three critical issues. The first, a severe shortage of acute care beds. They say this bed block forces us to routinely treat strokes, heart attacks, traumas, miscarriages, and palliative patients in the hallway. They also point to a dire shortage of hospitalist physicians. They're the doctors who admit you from the ER to the hospital. Quote, it's common for them to linger for days without an admitting physician looking after them. Many patients have suffered and some have died while waiting. They go on to say alarms they've raised to regional and provincial leaders have gone ignored. Our elective leaders, they say, have so far failed to provide any meaningful solutions that change the daily reality for physicians and the patients we care for.
We are stretched. There are times that people are waiting longer, but patients are always prioritized depending on their severity.
It all comes a week after a physician at Langley Memorial Hospital sent a memo to his colleagues urging them to ask patients to go somewhere else if they were having an emergency. BC's health minister responded, says the province is working with hospitalists and ER doctors to improve patient flow. And
in the case of both Langley and Surrey, that means that contracts that have not been renegotiated and re-put in place for a couple of years, we're addressing that, and we have an offer on the table to address their issues.
He says they are working to significantly increase the capacity of the healthcare system to respond. But ER doctors at other hospitals say the need is now.
I think the healthcare system is slow moving, and sometimes that's not fast enough to respond to an environment like the emergency department, where we're trying to be the safety net for society.
One doctor whose identity is being protected by CBC says healthcare leaders have repeatedly told physicians not to discuss the situation publicly. The doctor says the group is now breaking protocol in releasing this letter in the hopes it will cause government to act and because they think the public deserves to know what's going on. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
WestJet pilots have issued a 72-hour strike notice, meaning job action could start as early as Friday morning. A strike by the pilots has the potential to ground all aircraft, effectively shutting down operations. The pilots have been at the negotiating table in Toronto since last week, with the issues of pay, job security, and schedule still up in the air. WestJet CEO has said management is meeting with union representatives around the clock, hoping to reach a deal and avert a shutdown. The wait time for radiation treatment in BC is now so long, the province will start sending some patients south of the border to Bellingham for treatment.
For British Columbians dealing with a cancer diagnosis right now, today, in May of 2023, that's not fast enough. For them, for those they love and who love them back, it's not acceptable, and it is not acceptable for me.
The province says patients are facing long waits because of a shortage of radiation technologists and therapists and delays in getting crucial equipment upgraded. Patients living with breast cancer and prostate cancer will be prioritized for the program, which will launch on May 29th. The province will send 50 patients per month and will pay for all related travel costs. To the wildfire situation now, an entire northern BC town is now on evacuation alert. That's around 20,000 people who could soon be forced from their homes. Fort St. John is about 600 kilometers northwest of Edmonton in the Peace region of our province. As Philip O'Weira tells us, the alert comes less than 24 hours after the nearby Blueberry River First Nation issued its own evacuation order.
A city of more than 20,000 people preparing to leave at a moment's notice as smoke and flames spread near Fort St. John. For now, the Stoddart Creek wildfire, which has grown to more than 18 square kilometers, about 3 times the size of Stanley Park, is just one of 5 wildfires of note burning within the Prince George Fire District, and it's one of 2 burning near Fort St. John.
Obviously, this alert right now is primarily out of an abundance of caution to ensure that people are prepared if required to leave at a moment's notice. So this is an opportunity for you to make sure that you have your clothing packed, any necessary medication or paperwork, pet supplies, and an opportunity for all of that to be ready to go if needed.
The alert comes just hours after hundreds of evacuees, many of them from the Blueberry River First Nation, were told to pack essential items, valuables and pets and head to Fort St. John. If the alert is upgraded to an order, it will be one of the largest single evacuation orders due to wildfire in provincial history. BC Wildfire Service says over 70% of the fires burning in BC are human-caused.
There is the risk of an open fire use getting away. There is the risk if you are using an off-road vehicle in very dry off-road areas. And so we're asking folks to consider those conditions.
For now, authorities are telling people of Fort St. John not to panic, and all evacuees who are already registered in the town can stay there for now. Philip O'Weira, CBC News, Vancouver.
Earlier this evening, firefighters withdrew from fighting the fire near Fort St. John head-on as conditions became more dangerous. A section of Highway 97, 10 kilometers north of the town, is also closed due to the wildfire, and no local detour is currently available. But provincial officials say they will be providing their next update tomorrow morning, and we will bring you that. Meanwhile, heat warnings have been issued for the province's north coast. Environment Canada says 62 temperature records were set across the province this weekend alone, and there's a chance of more to come. Zara Premji has more from Abbotsford, where it hit a sweltering 33 degrees today.
As the mercury rises across BC, cooling off can often become a matter of life and death.
We're out here making sure people stay hydrated and stay alive. And that's our main priority.
While this burst of heat may be welcome for some, it's elevating concern for many of Abbotsford's unhoused.
Heat exhaustion is a huge factor, but also being under the influence of narcotics amplifies that high. So the risk of overdose is really big for a lot of our clients here.
The unseasonable temperatures also playing a concerning role for crops too.
If we do get a really hot weather, above 40 degrees, 42 degrees, sometimes the plants can die, protein stops moving. You can have losses, and it is detrimental for the farmers, detrimental for the community. There's not much you can do.
Along with heat warnings in the province, there's also an air quality advisory in place for the northeast of Metro Vancouver, as well as central and eastern Fraser Valley, all due to the Davis Lake fire near Mission. While there are signs of relief.
Tomorrow we do see a bit of cooling. We see more of a marine influence coming in. We should cool by about 6 degrees tomorrow to the upper 20s.
It may just be short-lived. Environment Canada issuing the first heat warning of the season for the North Coast and a potential of more on the way.
For the rest of the week, we actually see things maybe just warming up again slightly. So we'll see highs once again kind of in the upper 20s as we go through, say, about Friday.
While Environment Canada says some reprieve is on its way, it does warn British Columbians to be prepared for what they call heat episodes or unpredictable fluctuating temperatures. Zara Premji, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Well, some good news for Cache Creek. After devastating flooding, an evacuation order for some properties there has lifted tonight, and life is returning to some semblance of normal for its residents. Water levels in the Bonaparte River dropped slightly over the weekend. The village has completed work on a key water main, but a boil water advisory remains in place. The BC River Forecast Centre is maintaining a flood warning for Cache Creek. A flood watch is also in place around the Salmon River in Falkland, and North Thompson still has a high stream flow advisory. The CEO of Atira Women's Resource Society has resigned after a forensic audit found signs of mismanagement and a conflict of interest with the province's subsidized housing provider. The audit found conflict of interest violations between Janice Abbott and her husband Shane Ramsey, the former head of BC Housing. Ramsey allegedly directed large amounts of funds to Atira while the two were married. In a statement, Atira board chair Elva Kim writes, Abbott's departure will allow for more focus on, quote, the essential work with fewer distractions.
For people who live in Atira buildings who are worried about their housing, concerned about their housing situation, government will work closely with Atira to make sure that you are looked after, your housing is looked after, and the programs that you depend on will continue to be supported.
On Friday, Atira returned nearly $2 million to the province and announced a third-party review of its policies. Abbott's resignation comes after 31 years as CEO of Atira. Well, BC has by far the highest eviction rate in all of Canada, according to new research out of UBC. In fact, the study finds our province is nearly double the national average, and the vast majority of evictions are happening through no fault of the tenant. Michelle Ghoussoub is hearing first-hand stories and what experts are pitching as possible solutions.
Gutted, absolutely gutted, because you have an emotional connection to your house. It's my safe space.
Fiona Scott has been evicted from 3 different homes over the last 15 years, all for reasons out of her control. Last summer, she was rent-evicted from her Kitsilano apartment, a place she had called home for 7 years.
He was refitting the place and gonna probably make it all fancy for a higher rent somewhere else.
Finding a new home was difficult for Scott. Her new place is an extra $500 a month, and she says she's had to take on extra work to afford it.
Everything around there is created by me and makes me happy, and I can live my life in my community based in that place, and then all of a sudden it's gone.
Scott is not alone. A UBC study found more than 10% of BC renter households were evicted between 2016 and 2021, almost double the national average of 5.9%. And most BC evictions are through no fault of the tenant. This could mean the landlord is selling or demolishing the property, deciding to use it for themselves, or undergoing renovations. Craig Jones is one of the authors of the study.
Having, like residential stability as a renter in BC is hard. An eviction is a potentially traumatic event. It's a difficult thing to go through.
And the research shows those who experienced eviction reported lower levels of well-being and life satisfaction. Andy Yan is director of the city program at SFU. He says creating purpose-built rental housing could help, and so could a rental registry to track evictions. But above all, landlords should be held to stricter standards.
There is a responsibility of landlords to the safety and health of their tenants, and that there is, I think, this type of, underlying social contract that ought to be enforced by government.
And Yan says housing instability and eviction rates are amplified for certain groups, including young people, newcomers to Canada, and Indigenous people. Michelle Ghoussoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Wildlife experts are reminding the public to stay away from coyotes after 2 violent attacks just days apart. On Sunday, a 6-year-old girl was attacked at Burnaby's Deer Lake Park. Police say she was taken to hospital with lacerations on her legs. That comes after a similar incident on Wednesday when a 2-year-old was bitten by a coyote at Lions Park in Port Coquitlam. The animal was later killed by conservation officers.
So if coyotes learn that humans are associated with food, then they'll become closer to humans. They'll sort of lose their fear of humans, and once they've lost that fear of humans and they associate humans with food, then they start potentially testing little dogs or young children or other, trying to sort of get any food any way that they can.
Wildlife experts say leaving trash out or other sources of food can attract the coyotes. Small pets like cats and dogs can be an easy prey for the wild animals. Pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in North America, and new courts are bringing more than just players to different communities. Next, how noise from the constant paddling is leaving some neighbors in a pickle. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. May is often the month where people leave their lawns alone. It's called No Mow May, and it's supposed to be better for wildlife, particularly bees. But as Laura Meter reports, one biologist on PEI says leaving your dandelions alone might not be as helpful as people think.
Of course, their leaves are quite indented like that.
Kate McQuarrie says the best use for dandelions might be for humans, harvesting the leaves for salads or cooking. But when it comes to the value of the pollen, she says these flowers are like junk food for bees.
If you're leaving them for the bees, you're not really helping, and in fact, may be doing more harm than good.
She says they're not as nutritious as other native wildflowers and hopes people rethink No Mow May and leaving lots of dandelions.
So No Mow May started in Europe, and dandelions are native there. And I really think the message was intended to be let native wildflowers grow, and that's a fantastic message. But in North America, it's kind of been twisted to let dandelions grow, and that's not really what we'd like to encourage.
This time of year, plants like willows and alders are better for bees. McQuarrie says people should do what they can to encourage native shrubs and trees and just let even a little part of their lawn go wild. As for people, McQuarrie says dandelion leaves are high in vitamins and iron, even better than kale or spinach. She says the younger leaves are less bitter and they taste better before the plant blooms.
I also think a lot of people think they don't like them because they may have just tried them raw from older plants, and they really are bitter and not very good that way. But younger leaves or cooked older leaves, that's where you want to go. I kind of like to cook them with bacon because everything's better with bacon.
She hopes people will leave a few if they want to eat them, but don't leave lawns filled with them. Because remember that junk food analogy? Bees can't resist them.
If there's lots of dandelions around, they'll pick those rather than the healthier pollen that's better for them. Kind of like us, right? We'll go to the junk food or dip into the bag of chips before eating the celery sometimes, even though it's better for us.
She hopes to see fewer dandelions on lawns and maybe more in kitchens, and that people will start looking at the idea of No Mow May differently. Laura Meter, CBC News, Hazel Grove.
Welcome back. A pickleball court in Chilliwack has become a battleground between passionate players and neighbors of the park. At issue is the incessant noise. As Saurabh Sandhu explains, it's now prompted an apology from the mayor.
Pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in North America. But as racket sports go, it's noisier than most. In 2019, the city of Chilliwack opened new pickleball courts in Kinsman Park, merely a few feet away from Harpreet Dhawan's house.
You're standing in my patio, but look at the court, how far they are.
I'm standing right at the edge of the pickleball court, but if I take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps, and I'm right at the edge of Harpreet's property. Harpreet says the city did not consult the neighbors before constructing the court, but she did not oppose it at first as the community needed a space to exercise during the pandemic. Occasionally, she, along with her husband, even joined other players to enjoy the sport. However, all of that changed in 2021 when the courts were given a new surface and things got louder.
It is a continuous, very shrill noise. We had no clue how much noisy it could become.
Harpreet says the sound began to impact them psychologically and emotionally, forcing them to stay indoors most of the day.
I can't even sit in my house with a closed window, not even with the open window.
And Harpreet's not alone with her complaints.
My parents, my mom lives with me, and they still hear the noise of the ball and racket, tick-tock, all the time.
In August 2022, Harpreet says her husband filed a noise complaint with the city of Chilliwack. The pickleballers had a solution.
I spoke to the neighbors and offered that maybe we could pay to soundproof the office of the man that works from home.
So means my husband is a prisoner in my own house?
Seeing no solution in sight, the city has now restricted playtime on the courts, and players told they can only use a foam ball after 4 p.m.
So I just phoned the city yesterday about that because there isn't a foam ball that we use for pickleball.
For its part, the city says they know there was a potential misstep, but finding a solution is tricky.
We are trying to balance the needs of the whole community, and I apologize to the neighborhood.
Meanwhile, Harpreet says unable to cope with the noise problem, her husband has taken a break from work and gone to India.
They're just breaking my family, that's it.
Mayor Popov says they're looking to build pickleball courts in another area of the town. But until then, Harpreet and her family will have to live with the noise. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Chilliwack.
Here's a live shot of Georgia Street. John Sauter will have your full forecast next.
The scene is the Upper Levels Highway above the Capilano Gorge. Hundreds of people turn out to watch as 25,000 plastic duckies are lowered down to the river. The ducks are numbered. They've been sold at $5 a piece, the revenue going to various Rotary Club projects. Then comes the dumping. The racing ducks were bunched up at the beginning, but were well strung out at the finish.
They will be tested for steroids at the finish line. The first one is now out in front, ladies and gentlemen.
Scores of the ducks were caught along channel booms, but many more managed to make it to the finish line. And this was the winner. It earns for its owner a brand new car. The second prize was a free trip to Australia. Terry Dolan, CBC News.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back.
And that's what empowered nations and empowered people to just literally steal land.
This is a consequence of your actions.
And it's time to give land back.
Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
May is Asian Heritage Month, and we're highlighting the stories of amazing Asian Canadians who are making meaningful contributions in the community. More info at cbc.ca/BC Community. And register for the CBC's Indigenous Pathways to Journalism program. This paid 9-month learning and development opportunity supports Indigenous candidates to hone their skills as storytellers. Learn more at cbc.ca/pathways.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Meteorologist John Sauter joins us tonight. John, what is the latest on this hot stretch?
All right, here is your complete forecast for the province of British Columbia. And I'm going to start with a satellite image because it's not very often that we look at a satellite image which shows us where the cloud is covering the ground, and we really see a lack of cloud in the western part of the country. Now, this afternoon we are seeing a few little isolated showers, and some of that could be thunderstorm activity as we move into the night tonight and again on Tuesday afternoon. But a very clear map here through mainland British Columbia and out onto Vancouver Island. As we look at the smoke over the last 3 days, it has really changed, and you can see the locations of the fires, and this is the area of concern here in northeastern British Columbia. And over the last few days, we just see more and more smoke moving up into that area. But what has happened now with the upper level flow, it's taking that smoke out into the eastern prairies, and we now have air quality statements for northern parts of Saskatchewan and a big chunk of Manitoba as well. And we have that air quality statement in effect and the special weather statement, an air quality statement and heat statement for the rest of British Columbia. So temperatures today, pretty comfortable in Vancouver, 23, but you get a little farther inland and you see a few 30s around Osoyoos and Kelowna and Lytton, and then across the north, Prince George is at 28 this afternoon, 19s in Fort Nelson and Dease Lake. Those are the temperatures this afternoon. As we go forward, we're still going to see just generally sunny skies or smoky, hazy skies, but really not much weather in the southern mainland. That's where we'll see those little pockets of showers and possibly some thunderstorm activity. Otherwise, pretty clear skies right through Tuesday and Wednesday. Tonight, looking like clear conditions, and for most areas, lows right in the mid-teens. Tonight across the north, we get a little cooler across the far north, but tomorrow the temperatures really start to pick up once again. Terrace at 31, Prince George at 27, 29 in Williams Lake, and then across the south, we've got 34 in Lytton, a few thunderstorms around Osoyoos, and out toward Cranbrook, 23 in Vancouver, and with sunshine again for tomorrow. And then mid-20s in the coming days. It'll be the weekend before we start to see conditions returning to something more comfortable and more seasonal at 19 on Sunday, 18 on Monday into next week.
Thanks, John. And that is your late news for Monday. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC, where you can find all the latest information on wildfires and evacuations in this province. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts at 5 a.m. Good night.